To today's webinar on Financial Aid 101. Let's see if we can get started here. So I want to share a little bit about today's presenters. We have Tracy Reisinger, our Director of Financial Aid here at Marylhurst, and the voice that you're hearing is Simona Beatty. I am going to be your webinar moderator. So I want to go over what we're going to cover in today's webinar. So we're going to give you sort of the nuts and bolts around financial aid, and especially focus on advice to make sure that your financial aid application and you're really getting the most out of what's available out there as far as resources. We're also going to cover some key deadlines, especially because things have changed a little bit this year. And then we're going to leave plenty of time for your questions, and that way Tracy can get you some answers. And I want to point out that we are going to be recording this webinar, so you will receive a copy of the video following this session in about 24 hours. So watch for that email. And of course, if you missed that email message, you can always go to the Marylhurst YouTube channel and see it and watch it there. So without further ado, let's get started with the information. So Tracy, what aid is available?
Well, the best types of financial aid are the free sources of funding, and those are grants and scholarships. And this is money that is just gift funding. It does not have to be repaid. So when you're applying for financial aid, the grants and scholarships are the funds that you're trying to maximize and get the most of. The other types of financial aid are federal student loans, and loans do have to be repaid. Usually they are deferred, so there's no payment required, while the student is enrolled at least half time. For some loans, the interest may be accruing while you're enrolled, but for the most part, the loans don't have to be repaid until you're no longer half time and you finish the program. Then the other program is the work-study program, and this is where a student would be eligible to be paid with federal work-study dollars if they're working in an on-campus work-study position on their campus.
So let's talk about who's eligible to receive financial aid.
Okay. First of all, to be eligible, you have to be admitted into an eligible degree program. And so you need to check with the schools that you're looking at. Most bachelor's degrees and master's degrees or doctoral degrees are all eligible programs. Where it gets a little bit tricky is sometimes if you're going for a certificate program, not all certificates are eligible for financial aid. Also, if you're going for an associate's degree, say at a community college, usually those are eligible. But you do have to be fully admitted into a degree program that qualifies for aid. Also, for most types of aid, you need to be a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen. So you have your resident alien card. And also, most require that you be enrolled at least half time, which is 6 credits for an undergraduate for most aid programs. Also, you need to have what's called a high school diploma or its equivalent. So if you've taken the GED exam, there are some exemptions to this, but you would need to check with your school to see if they qualify. But primarily, you need to have a high school diploma or its equivalent. And then finally, if you have had federal aid in the past, specifically student loans, you need to have not gone into default on any previous student loans or had to pay back any federal grants. So that's the minimum criteria for most types of financial aid at most schools.
Gotcha. Can you clarify for half-time, what does that mean for a graduate student?
For graduate students, it varies from school to school. Most schools will define a graduate student as full-time at anywhere from 8 to 9 credits. So half-time is typically half of that. So for example, at Marylhurst, 8 credits is full, so 4 credits would be half-time. So it's going to vary from school to school. You would need to check with them.
Gotcha, and it's really important to check if they're a semester school or a quarter credit school, correct?
Yes, yes.
All right, so let's talk about how to apply for aid.
Okay.
So the process is easier is what I hear.
It is easier. They try to make it simpler every year. They go through the process, they review it. The big one that really intimidates a lot of people and can be kind of scary, but it is easier to do, is the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA form. This is available at fafsa.ed.gov. This is the one that all students need to fill out and complete, regardless of which school you're going to, if you want to be considered for federal or state grants or federal student loans or federal work-study funds. And also, most schools will require it to be considered for institutional scholarships and grants that are based on anything other than merit. So that's the big one. It's going to ask for things like income, family size, maybe your assets, things like that. So that's the one that everybody has to do. It's really important right now if you're filing for financial aid for either the current year, the 2016-17 year, or for next year for 17-18, to make sure when you go to the website that you're filling out the correct year's application, because there's 2 years applications going on at the same time right now. So, and if you're applying for aid right now for, say, spring term, you'd be doing the current 16-17 year application. If you're applying for aid for next fall of 2017, you're going to be doing the 17-18 application. If you're starting in the summer, you need to check with the school that you're attending to see which year they consider summer to be a part of. So that's a little bit complicated, but that's the big one everybody has to do. And then also check with the schools to see if they require anything else. If you're flagged for a process called verification by the federal processor, most schools will need you to do what's called a verification worksheet. They may also need what's called a tax return transcript from the IRS. That may or may not be what I call waivable, depending on how you fill out the FAFSA form. But you want to check with the school to see if there's anything else that they require for the verification process. And also, if the school for institutional aid, if there's any other applications the schools may require just to be considered for their own aid. Minimally, you have to do the federal application and possibly verification. But for institutional aid, there may be separate forms that you need to do to fill out for institutional scholarships. And here's what I kind of mentioned. If you're flagged for verification and the school needs a tax return transcript, that can be waived if you have used a process called the IRS data retrieval process when you do your FAFSA form. And what that means is you actually transfer your data from the IRS directly to the FAFSA form. And if you've done this and haven't changed any of the numbers, then the school can waive the tax return transcript. So just a matter if you can complete that process successfully. Okay.
So let's talk about scholarships, a really key element in this today's day and age for people to be able to afford their college education.
Yeah. When you're doing the application process that I just described, what the schools are going to look for is federal and state aid and most institutional aid. What schools aren't going to be looking for are outside scholarships, as I call them. So scholarships offered by outside organizations. And so this is where the student has to kind of take the lead and look for different resources. If you're an Oregon resident, my best recommendation would be to go through the Oregon Office of Student Access and Completion, and their website is the one listed there, the getcollegefunds.org. They are a state agency, and they handle over 400 scholarships. They're primarily for Oregon residents attending Oregon schools. But you only have to do one scholarship application to be considered for all of these different scholarships. So that's your best source for more local scholarships. Some of the other sites that we've got listed here, finaid.org, fastweb.org, and saltmoney.org, those are scholarship search engines where it's more a national search, where a student would enter a personal profile, for example, what their major is, what year they are in school, what their GPA is, things like that. And these databases would search through their scholarships and try to find matches and provide the students with a list of scholarships nationwide that the student may qualify for and provide contact information for the student to follow up with. So it's an excellent way to look for scholarships from outside resources on both a local and a national scale. We have some other links on our website to some other organizations, but those are the big ones. The main thing is all of these are free. It should never cost you money to look for outside scholarships or to apply for financial aid in general. It should never cost you a fee.
And that's a huge point to make. You know, anytime you see a fee come up, it's a red flag.
It's a red flag. Anytime it costs more than the price of a stamp, then you probably shouldn't even bother with it.
Gotcha. And you know, sometimes people think that they're not eligible for scholarships because they either don't have the GPA or, but you know, there's thousands of scholarships out there.
Oh yeah, there are thousands of scholarships out there with all sorts of different criteria. And so I would always say do the searches, apply for them. If you don't meet the criteria, definitely don't waste your time or the donor's time. But even if you have a GPA that's at the lower end of the scale for the scholarship, there's lots of other criteria that they're looking at. And they're trying to look for the best fit. And that's not always just GPA. So definitely go through the process. Also, if there's an essay requirement, go for it. Don't let the essay scare you, because a lot of times students don't apply because there is an essay, and so the applicant pool is a lot smaller, and your chances are a lot larger at successfully getting the scholarship if you're willing to put in a little bit of the work.
Sure, and there's a lot of scholarships that are also based on your interests and hobbies.
Yes, yeah, they might be based on a specific major, on somebody graduating from a specific high school, from a specific county, or a specific activity. I had a colleague who they created a scholarship for somebody who played the bagpipes at the local school. So there's always something interesting out there that's not just based on what your GPA is.
Great. All right. So the next part is really about once you get a financial package from an institution and how to really examine it accurately or appropriately.
A lot of people make the mistake of looking at a financial aid award. They get financial aid awards from multiple schools, and they say, oh, this school offered me the most money. But that's not necessarily the best package. So don't just look at the total amount of free scholarship money that's there. You need to look at what's the total cost of the school, because one school may offer you more scholarship money, but if their tuition is higher, you might be, not be as good of a deal. What you want to look at is, in the overall package, if you're offered student loans, what's your total debt going to be at the completion of your degree? So not just 1 year's worth of aid, but estimating out 2, 3, 4 years to finish the degree, how much total loan debt are you going to end up? And combined with that, what's your out-of-pocket cost going to be? So if the aid doesn't cover your tuition and fees or room and board costs, how much out-of-pocket are you going to have to do? So loan debt plus out-of-pocket costs are key things to look at. But also, even with the scholarships, you might have some great scholarships, but what are the renewal criteria to keep the scholarships? You might get this great scholarship, but if it requires a 3.5 or a 3.8 to keep it, that can be pretty hard sometimes in a college setting versus a high school setting especially. Or what if you change your major? If you start out as an engineering major and then you want to switch to English, what's going to happen to that scholarship? So those are the questions you have to ask the financial aid office at the schools to make sure what is your overall cost, what's overall debt, and what's the possibility of these scholarships staying constant throughout the year so you can finish your degree, even if you change majors, or maybe just have a bad turn somewhere in there.
So let's talk about timelines. I know this is always a question because people think, it's past January or we're getting, do I even have a shot at financial aid?
Yeah. And the timelines have been changing for the 17-18 year as well. Typically the FAFSA was available in early January, and we would always say file by the end of January if at all possible. Well, for the 17-18 year, the FAFSA has been available since October 1st. So people have been filing now. So definitely file now if you haven't already done so. A lot of schools are changing their filing priority deadlines. So you want to check with the schools to make sure if their filing deadline was March 1 in a previous year, have they moved it up because of the new timeline? You can always apply later. I don't want people to get scared if they haven't applied by the end of January or February. You can apply later. We still have students who are applying this year for the current academic year, but some funds do run out. And so for maximum aid consideration, the earlier you can apply, the better. Also keeping in mind that you have to reapply each year. So if you've filled out your applications now for the 16-17 year, now's the time to be applying for the 17-18 year. So you reapply every year to get your aid renewed. Most schools will send out reminder notices to their students saying, hey, it's time to reapply, but always double check with them to make sure if there's anything new that they have instituted to get your aid renewed. And I would say a lot of schools are going to still have a March 1 deadline, but double check with them for sure, because a lot of these deadlines have been changing, especially for the 17-18 year. And for the big one for March 1st, the Oregon Student Access Completion Scholarship application that we mentioned previously, that one is still March 1st for the 17-18 year. They do have an early bird deadline of in mid-February for extra scholarship consideration, but that's a big deadline not to miss.
All right. And at the very least, we're here to help you. So I would say anytime you're sort of going through this process, it's always good to connect either with the school that you're intending to apply to, their financial aid office. And Tracy, I know your team is always a very helpful resource to anyone that really has questions about financial aid.
Absolutely. And whether you're calling our office or the other school's office, and like we said here, we're here to help you. Financial aid offices, we want to make this process as easy and painless and stress-free as it possibly can be. So if you have any questions, or if you're just scared about the process and you want to check in, contact the school, and they'd be happy to let you know where you are in the process, what the status is, when you'd expect to hear from them. If you have general questions, you don't want to contact your school, you're afraid to bug them too much, contact us. We can answer general questions usually about how to fill out specific applications and things like that. So definitely call us.
Okay. So we are to the question portion of the webinar. So this is really your chance. If you have questions for Tracy, you can locate the question box on the right in your panel. Just go ahead and type in your question there. Just know we are going to answer questions that are more fitting to the general audience, so for the public, since this is being recorded and will be posted in a public forum. But if you have a personal question to you, go ahead and add it in there anyway. I won't ask it out loud, but we will contact you after with an answer. So really this is your moment to really ask an expert in financial aid any of your questions that you might have. So let's see. I guess, Tracy, what's one of maybe a common question that you get in the financial aid office, if you were to think off the top of your head?
Well, a real common one is, well, what types of aid are out there, which we've kind of talked about a little bit, but sometimes people will get financial aid offers and go, well, I don't understand, what does this loan mean, or what does this scholarship mean, and we're here to help with that. So loans have different terms. There's different interest rates, there's different fees, and so we try to go help people with that. In terms of scholarships too, sometimes they'll get a financial aid package from the school and they haven't done a search for outside scholarships, and so it's not too late in most instances, especially if you're starting the process now for the 17-18 year. Fall and spring is the time to be searching for aid for the next academic year's package. But I would not wait to search for outside scholarships until after you've received a financial aid award from a school. Do them both at the same time. Some students also think that they have to be admitted before they can apply for financial aid. Many times we do need the student to be admitted to do an offer, but you can be applying for aid and admissions at the same time. So the aid application is ready to go at the point the student is admitted, and we can get going there. So
that's an excellent point to kind of speed up the process and make sure there's no hiccups along the way.
Yes, and also if you get a request from the school for some type of information, you think you've already submitted it, don't ignore the request, because it could be we've lost it or we have a clarifying question. Whenever the school tries to reach out to you, be sure to respond, even if it's with a, I thought I already turned this in, and we can double check. That's the hardest thing, is we try to confirm information or clarify information and we don't hear from the student, and that can delay things. So, and be sure to check your emails. A lot of schools are communicating via emails now. Check your spam box, make sure your schools is not going into the spam box, because almost all communication from the schools lately is via email, simply because it's really fast and efficient via postal mail.
Gotcha. So we have a question about, can someone apply for financial aid for spring term now? I'm assuming for spring term, this coming spring term.
Yes.
So absolutely.
Yes, it's not too late to apply. Again, some types of aid have run out, but some types of aid are always available if the student qualifies. For example, if the student qualifies for a federal Pell Grant or a federal student loan, those are always available. So it's definitely not too late to apply.
Now, if we were asking about spring term in 2018, which would be next year, they can apply now, correct?
You could apply now also, because both years are going at the same time. So you could be filling out your aid application for this spring, and you could be filling it out for next fall, winter, spring of 17-18. Absolutely.
So I have a question about what's the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized loans? What is sort of the big difference between those?
The big difference is the subsidized loan is a need-based loan, and that's based on the FAFSA results. I won't get too technical. But the bottom line is the subsidized loan is interest-free while the student is enrolled at least half time. So no interest is accruing on that loan while the student is enrolled at least half time. The unsubsidized loan does not require financial need, so anybody can qualify for it, but the interest would be accruing while the student is enrolled, and thereby adding to the principal. So it's a less desirable loan than the subsidized one. If you're a graduate student, unfortunately, only the unsubsidized loan is available for graduate students. They no longer offer the subsidized one for graduate students.
And what's the advice around private loans? Because I know that sometimes comes up too. It's, if you don't get into the federal level, should they go out and look for private loans? What's your advice on that?
I would say maximize your federal loans first, primarily because usually the terms are better, not just in terms of interest rate. Sometimes you can find a private alternative loan with a lower interest rate than a federal loan, But especially in terms of repayment plans, once you go into repayment, the federal loans have so many different options for repayment, including what's called an income-sensitive plan, where they base your monthly payment on what your income is. And it could be that you don't have to make any payments because your income's too low. Versus a private alternative loan, you don't have that option for some of those. If something happens after you finish your degree and you're unable to find work, or you just get an economic hardship, there's a lot more flexibility with federal loans for repayment and deferring loans than you do with alternative loans. So maximize the federal loans first. If you can't get enough federal loan to cover your bills, then we do talk about looking for different private alternative loans, but definitely maximize the federal ones first.
And also, you know, a lot of questions come up once they're a current student, they're going through the process, and they come up against a scenario where they run out of, you know, like they get to a term and go, uh-oh, you know, what's the advice? Because I know a lot of schools offer tuition payment plans, you know, instead of just popping it onto your credit card. You know, is that a point that your office also talks people through sometimes?
We actually, those types of questions we generally would refer to our student accounts office. So if you're having questions about that with your school, find out what options they have. Most schools will offer some type of payment plan option. It's just a matter of how soon that payment plan has to be repaid before you can register for the following term. That's the key one. If you can avoid putting anything on a credit card, I would highly recommend that, just because credit cards, the interest rates are so much higher, you can't defer those payments versus taking out a student loan. And some students really don't want to go into debt, which is totally understandable. There's been a lot of talk on the news about the federal loan debt and issues students have. But with the repayment plans they offer right now, it's so much easier to avoid economic hardship problems, especially if you have difficulty finding work with student loans, than trying to deal with a credit card debt that can't be deferred for any reason. And also, if you're looking at student loans, there's a thing called, there's good debt and there's bad debt. And student loans are considered good debt because it's investing in your future earning potential. And if you look at almost any statistic across the country, students with bachelor's degrees versus students without bachelor's degrees, their earning potential is so much higher. So if you take out, you know, $30,000, $40,000, even $50,000 in student loans, but you have the potential to earn $500,000, $700,000 more over your earning lifetime versus somebody who doesn't have that degree, that's a very good return on your investment. And so that's the way you have to think about student loans in terms of debt. It's a good debt.
Okay. So I'm not seeing any other questions, so we're going to go ahead and sort of wrap up the webinar. Tracy and I want to say thank you for attending. Again, all of the information that has been shared here will be available to you through a video, which we'll email to you within the next 24 hours. Also, if you lose that email or want to refer back to it, to the video, you can always go to our YouTube channel. Just look up Marylhurst University on YouTube and it'll come up. There's a whole playlist around webinars, so if you enjoyed this one, there's a ton more for you to watch that have really helpful information about pursuing your college degree and advice from us. So again, if you happen to ask a question after this, after we shut down, we will email you back, and that way we can get you some answers as well. So again, thank you for attending, and happy admissions and happy filing for your federal financial aid.
Thank you.